Hong Kong Direct is your weekly racing roundup full of news, views, previews, interviews and special guests. And coming up on today's show, we're going back in time and take a walk down memory lane with former Racecaller Richard Hoiles. He chats with Ed very shortly indeed. We've had a number of our superstars back already, but last year's Horse of the Year, Exultant, get ever closer his return for the new season. He'll feature in Trial File in part number 2. And of course, we get the rematch a week on Sunday. Golden 60, last year's Derby hero who downed Beauty Generation first up this season. Can he get his revenge? We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Very warm welcome to the show. I'm Andrew Jeune. Pleased to say I'm joined by our Racecaller Tom Wood in a Racecaller special, if you like, with Richard joining us as well. Tom, 11 meetings into this evening. It's meeting number 11 coming up on Sunday. What have you made of everything so far?
Yeah, great to be on the show, Andrew. We've had an exciting start to the season. Meeting number 11 coming up this weekend at Jeune of 88, and of course we've seen some really nice horses step out, particularly horses that started off really well last season, have kept up to the mark this season. I speak of Skyfield and also a Winning Dream. We've seen excellent proposal, put up a couple of super wins on the board in those recent outings, and also in terms of the trainers and the jockeys. Well, Casper Founds, he's kicked the season off with a bang. He's up to 13 winners for the season already. Good to see Francis Loy also carry on with that momentum up to 8, and Joe Moreira is 5 in front of Zach Purton in terms of the jockeys premiership at the moment, especially off the back of that 6-timer he had a couple of weeks ago at Jeune. But he's clear at the moment. 5 on Zach, who's on 15, and Karis Teaton not too far away. But jockeys like Matthew Chadwick have also kicked the season off really well also.
He certainly has, yeah. Matthew had a double on Wednesday night at Happy Valley. Joe sits out Sunday's programme once more through suspension, so Zach, with a good book of rides, has a chance to make a dent in that lead once more. Let's get straight into it, though. Plenty to get through on today's show, and start off with Richard Hoiles chatting with Ed Sadler.
Richard, it's a real pleasure to have you here on Hong Kong Direct. Of course, you did work here many years ago. When you look back at your time in Hong Kong, what are some of the memories that come back?
It was a fast-track learning experience, to be honest, Edward. I think it was more like a college degree. I was there sort of 3 years. Obviously, it was more Southern Hemisphere training than Northern Hemisphere, and I think that's probably what the steep learning curve was. There are still some parallels. You've still got Douglas White, although he's obviously a trainer now rather than a jockey. And I did smile when David Hayes returned, of course, because that was the era he was fighting out the championship virtually every year with Ivan Allen. So it was a great deal of pleasure. I learned a massive amount. And hopefully it stood me in good stead in the years that have gone by since.
Certainly, you've achieved so much in your career. From a calling point of view, Richard, British racing and Hong Kong racing are quite different. Did it take you a little while to adjust to the Hong Kong style of racing and calling here?
Yes, it did. And I think it's obviously a different style. We tend to be probably a little bit slower in delivery and what have you. I was never principal caller there. I was host rather than, so I was second caller. So I was only calling sort of once every 2 or 3 weeks. And as a result, initially at least, that took a little bit of getting used to. It's just a faster tempo, isn't it? They race tighter. It's a lot more name calling. And with the distances being 2,000 metres or less, you don't have those distance races, and certainly not the jumping races, obviously, that we have in the UK. So the tempo took me a while. Some will say I never quite got the hang of it, but it was certainly a great experience.
Here's the moment, Johan Cruyff, the button pressed, he finds 3 and storms to Derby glory. Johan Cruyff, a flick of the reins from Eric Legree. Monza battling out second with On Rapport and Born to Win. Johan Cruyff, we thought he was good, he smashed them.
The big days that you were here for, Richard, you would have seen the likes of Fairy King Prawn, Jim and Tonic, Indigenous. What are some of the memorable moments on track that you were here for?
Yeah, I think that's true. Fairy King Prawn in particular. If you like, the international horses were just beginning to become Group 1 international standard, I think, before the advent of Silent Witness, who just briefly overlapped with my time there. But yeah, Indigenous was probably the hero horse, if you like, in the sense that he used to run at every trip. Your best horses in those days in Hong Kong were capable of beating virtually every horse from 1,000 metres right the way through to 2,400, providing obviously they stayed that far. If you had an Indigenous, he would run Australian style, if you like, in all the big races over all the different trips. And so my great enjoyment as well that I still occasionally see Mr. Vitality, who was your first Triple Crown winner, who's now 29, I think, in retirement at a sanctuary in the UK. So I remember people going to see him off at the airport as well. So yeah, there's some fine familiar names there. Billion Win, Best of the Best, Fairy King Prawn, that sort of era when they were fighting out the Stewards Cup. A couple of terrific finishes there.
I've spoken to a few of your former colleagues in preparation for this interview, Richard. One former colleague of yours brought up a story of there was a guest race caller's night at Happy Valley, and you might have cut it a bit fine in getting to the broadcast box on time. Is that true?
Yes, that possibly is. That might be Greg. I don't know. But yes, we were all... They wanted a photo call, but unfortunately, the Jockey Club hadn't discovered the traffic issues that are always around Happy Valley, and they cut it a bit fine. And by the time we were all assembled back at the hotel, I realised that it was going to be a little bit tricky to get to the broadcast box. I think the race I was calling was definitely 7:30, and at 7:26 and 30 seconds, I was still on the bus when the driver took a wrong turn and needed to go round the one-way system again. So I bailed out and ran up to the box and just made it in time to call the first race on callers night. I think the others got there in time to hear a repeat of the call and actually didn't quite believe that I'd made it up to the box in time. But I still know my way around those lifts and up those corridors.
No competitor trying to kick from the front. Rory's bid American Win, Flying Knight and Happy Eclipse out after the leader, but no competitor still has a length. American Win, Happy Eclipse coming down the centre, Flying Knight, Rory's bid still in front. No competitor, they're out after the leader. He's only got a length in hand as he goes to the line, but it'll be enough. No competitor will last home, tight for second place.
As well as wanting to reminisce on your time here in Hong Kong, Richard, also want to talk to you about British Champions Day, which is coming up. We'll be simulcasting it here in Hong Kong. I know there's a little bit of water to go under the bridge between now and race day, but for Hong Kong racing fans here who will be tuning in and having a punt, who are the horses that we should be looking out for at Ascot on that day?
Yeah, so water under the bridge is a fair analogy because it's been really wet here over the last couple of weeks, and that's had an impact on the ground conditions. Ascot actually lost a meeting last weekend, so there's talk they might switch to the inner track, which doesn't have a massive amount of difference. It's a bit like racing on your A course rather than the C+3 in the sense it's a little bit tighter. I think the main horses that you'll be looking at, the high-profile horse will be Palace Pier in the QE2. He's been our boom miler really this year since he beat Pinatubo and Wichita at Ascot, and he's gone on with things and impressed in France as well. The clash between him and Kamiko, who won our Guineas here and returned to form in the Joel Stakes, will probably be the highest profile clash of the meeting. But you shouldn't, if the ground comes up soft, ignore the claims of a horse like the Revenant, who was placed on soft ground last year, and also at a big price, because I remember from my days that Quinellas and Tierces and everything else is what's important. Lord Glitters, if you want to stick Lord Glitters in your multiples, an Ascot specialist will relish the ground. So the QE2 is probably the most competitive race. The Champion Stakes over 10 furlongs, 2,000 metres, is a race that is not the vintage one, but it's going to be quite open as a result. A horse called Mishrif has risen sort of undetected through the ranks in this country, mainly because a lot of his achievements occurred abroad, particularly in France and in Saudi Arabia, where he ran really well. First sort of that intimated he was a very versatile horse. Another John Gosden representative. We're not too sure about the Aidan O'Brien participations. We have this feed issue at the moment in Europe with some of the leading yards, which will cause the withdrawal of the horses from the Arc. And as a result, it may well be that Aidan O'Brien turns up with more horses than we might expect. Magical is both in the Champion Stakes and also potentially in the fillies and mares. And we've got Gayeth and even Love, who probably won't come here because the ground would still be too soft. But both of those are horses we might see. And likewise, Stradivarius in the staying race, who ran in the Arc, didn't get anything like enough to test the stamina. But he'll be the one that most people will be interested if he turns up. Gosden has a really strong hand because he has Logician in that race as well. So John Gosden is very much the trainer to keep an eye on. The high-profile horses will be Palace Pier in the QE2 and probably Mishrif in the Champion Stakes.
Well, Richard, it's been fabulous to chat to you. Can't wait for Champions Day, and in general, it's been great to reminisce on your time here in Hong Kong. You're so well remembered. So thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us, and all the best for what lies ahead in the British season.
It's a pleasure, Edward, and please pass on my best to everyone who's still plying their trade out there. It was a fantastic experience, and I owe Hong Kong a great deal.
Great to hear from Richard Hoiles, one of the world's great race callers now. So since Ed spoke with Richard, there's been talk of Enable now running on Champions Day as well. Tom, whether that happens or not, we're still a week away, remains to be seen, but she'd be a pretty big draw card as well, even after that Arc disappointment.
Yeah, she just didn't quite let down there. The ground was particularly heavy over in France on that occasion last weekend for Enable, but it would be good to see her there. She certainly is a draw card to Enable wherever she goes, and to have her competing amongst some of the best on Champions Day at Ascot would be terrific. Yeah,
it'd be terrific to see some of those Aidan O'Brien horses come here for December as well. Just on Richard, though, Tom, he's part of a long line, this roll of honour of race callers here in Hong Kong. You know, recently we've had, you know, Darren Flindell and David Raphael, Richard, Jim McGrath as well. I mean, it really is a who's of race calling. No pressure on yourself.
Yeah, Hong Kong has been fortunate over the years, Andrew, to have some terrific race callers come through. Certainly Darren Flindell and Brett Davis in recent years, and you go back to the likes of Richard Hoiles and David Raphael with some of his international calls, which were absolutely scintillating. And then also Jim McGrath, he was certainly one of the real pioneers of the craft down through the years, bringing his Australian flair over to the UK. And I think Richard certainly took plenty of that on, and he certainly has that more Australian, New Zealand style over in the UK, Richard, rather than anybody else there. And I think Jim McGrath was certainly one of the real pioneers when he went over to the UK that sort of developed that style over there.
Yeah, and Terry Spargo as well, another name I probably should have mentioned. There'll be more that I've forgotten, apologies if I have, but yeah, Richard Hoiles, great to have him on. And Tom will be finishing the show actually with one of his favourite race courses, which happens to be Hong Kong. Will it have a Kiwi influence? We'll find out in due course. Plenty more to come in part 2, including the trial files with Exultant and Hot King Prawn hitting the track.